Good morning, Dima. How are you doing?
Hello, Rob. We've missed you last week.
I know it's been tough being on vacation. It's been good to get away, but I have missed being at home. Actually, I've missed the show. That it feels so weird and icky and awkward.
It's been less than a week. You already miss everything.
It's the truth.
Yeah,
it's the truth that I'm choking up over here because I already have someone knocking on the door.
Yes, the audience. So bring them. It's good.
We'll see about that. I blocked them off with some furniture, and that's not going to stop the knocking. So,
yeah,
we have a very important guest today with an important topic, right?
Yes.
So we need to bring her on. We need to get dirty with this, dive in, and I do need to make a correction, right? This is the dialogue on Race Louisiana. So let's bring Maxine on in. And what do you think, Dima? You think we can get her in really quick?
Yes, we definitely need to hear from Maxine with everything that we are going through and all of these changes. So hello, Maxine. Welcome to our Chit Chat.
Hello, Dima and Rob.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting to hear from you, Maxine.
Great.
Maxine, this is interesting. I haven't seen you in person in a while, but I know you've been busy ever since. I first met you around. I was thinking about it last night because I think met you around 9 years ago, and we were having the same topics then, same discussions then, and it seems like they're more enhanced now and for a good reason. Can we just talk about sort of what you advocate for, what messages you want to get across today?
Well, when you say what do we advocate for, I'm taking that you're asking what is the mission of our organization?
Absolutely.
Yes. Our organization is an organization that educates people about race. It is an educational process, and it's structured, facilitated, and backed by factual material. And so when people think of dialogue, because the word is not new, they just think of sitting around having a discussion. There are discussions, but what we do is make it a conversation that can move through the problem, that lead to understanding and change, because our motto is talk is action.
Wow. Talk is action.
Talk is action.
Can you explain that some more?
I usually say the opposite. I keep saying, even during this time, I say we need less talk and more action. So tell us what you.
Yeah, people come. I'm glad you said that, because people come into dialogue saying, "Look, we've been talking long enough." Just as Rob said, you've been doing this for a long time and maybe expanded now. Well, the organization itself is 8 years old, but this dialogue process is about 20 years old. But it's interesting when people say, "We've been doing it that long. Why isn't there more change?" For one thing, we were talking into a well at first. Not many people were listening or agreeing. So it was only in 2015 when we saw an expansion of people entering the dialogue conversation, and some other areas in the region were asking to be a part of it. But it still wasn't huge until 2016, when Alton Sterling was killed by police in Baton Rouge. And so it picked up really big time then. And then by the August, I believe, Alton Sterling was in July, and by the end of August, there was a flood, which race issues came up again along with that. And so we had another new wave of people wanting to be a part of dialogue. And then the election of 2016 in November, it picked up again. Well, at this time, it's exploded. So it hasn't been just all along, we've been plodding along with this. We've been doing it, but in very, very limited ways because people didn't quite see the need for it. And often they would say, yeah, I've been meaning to do that. I just haven't had time. Now, obviously, people are making time, or the pandemic has given them time. Not sure which, but it's exploded, their interest in dialogue. Now, what we do in this process, what makes me say talk is action, is because if we just run into action now, we would be like the posse in the Oxbow Incident, which is a classic movie starring Henry Fonda about people who thought they knew, who had rustled someone's cattle and killed them, killed a family. And they went off and lynched someone, or hung someone in those days, they called it. And that was not the person. So that's what action does if you really haven't clearly defined the problem. And in fact, racism is not clearly defined in this country, hasn't been. It may be for the first time getting a clear public definition, which isn't clear yet. But when you hear the protests saying we want justice and systemic change, that's key language. So now when people clearly define racism, then they know what they're trying to do. Because very often people come in thinking, it's being mean to people. It's not nice people. It's the worst of it is the Ku Klux Klan. And all of those things are myths and misunderstandings that muddy the waters and keep the solution almost seeming impossible. But when you clearly understand that racism is a construct in this country that began at its founding, when the decision to clear the natives from land and take the land because it was part of building the economy of this country, and then to capture, enslave Africans and force them to work to build the economy. When you did that and then determined to have a constitution that determined who would be the citizens of this country, and as that constitution is being written, it isn't even in the mind of the founding fathers writing it that the people who were enslaved or the people who were indigenous were going to be counted in how they determine who would be citizens. And so with that founding, eventually it became, when immigration picked up, when they saw they were building an economy, and they needed immigrants, they needed citizens to spend money to build this economy. And the flood of immigrants started coming in. They decided, wait, some of these people aren't desirable. They're not going to make good citizens. So the ranking along the way was set up, and eventually it was constructed, and it was constructed and mostly codified at the end of the slave system, when they came up with the Jim Crow laws that limited, clearly and legally limited the access that people who had been descendants of slaves could not access places that they considered for the preferred citizens, which were determined to be white. So they ranked a hierarchy of human value from the founding and codified it with the Jim Crow laws, which lasted 100 years. In 1964, a measure came along that said, this is no longer legal. But the measure only made the statement and gave those who had been criminalized by crossing what had been set up as the color line, they were criminalized and arrested by police. Well, when the civil rights law came, it says, okay, those of you who have been discriminated against, if you can prove that you're being discriminated against, then take it to court. So the law had no power to criminalize those who practice racism, nor did it demand that institutions remove the barriers that they had legally put in place. Never just, but legal. So until you understand that setup, then all the talk would not lead to meaningful, beneficial change.
Yeah. I understand now when you say talk results in action, because with the talk is mainly education. You're trying to educate them on the history. You're trying to educate them of what generation after generation has done that led us to where we are right now. One of the things I say is our beliefs lead to action. So when we educate people, we are helping them adjust their beliefs, especially the ones that come with toxic beliefs from the past.
Totally.
when we help people believe in equality, believe in the rights for everybody, believe in the Black Lives Matter, that's when their action they're going to change.
That's right. And when people know better, they do better.
Yes.
So we wouldn't want an oxbow incident where people are running off, hanging the wrong person. You need to know what you're doing, because there can be meaningful change. And my best example is that when it was determined that secondhand smoke was dangerous, people didn't agree with that. And then smokers thought they decided that they had rights. So people would put up signs where people were smoke-free to lower their insurance rates. So it became institutional change. And by the time it was complete, it was like no places were most places were smoke-free. And eventually places no one thought would be smoke-free, like casinos and bars.
Yeah.
And yet now it's normal to everyone to expect to go into a place and not breathe secondhand smoke. And it is also normal to smokers. They no longer think it's a bad idea. They are understanding that they have a right to smoke and no one has to demonize them. So I'm looking for the change that would not demonize people who are racially prejudiced that we're so mad at, and just send them to smoke their racism outside. You know, it's sort of like you have to demonize them. You fine if you can be prejudiced, but you can't do it here. You can't use barriers from the institutions to limit anyone. You sort of keep it to yourself.
Yes. Wow. So when I'm observing all the protests that are going on, it is amazing for me to see how the younger generations, they are the ones that are leading and also organizing them. I didn't read about it, but I heard in Baton Rouge, 2 of the organizers are high school students. So that gives me hope, gives me a sense of hope that, okay, for years and years and for generations, we haven't moved a lot to the right direction, but now we have a new generation demanding the equality and demanding all the important things that we need. So I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? What are your experiences related to this?
They're exactly what you just said. In addition, there were young people all along the way, all those other years. What happened is after 1964, there was the belief the problem is solved. And so when those who were still experiencing color barriers were experiencing them, people would tell them, you're just whining. The establishment said, you know, what do they want? Whites were saying, they've been given so much. What are they complaining about? So people started to shut up and go to work and keep their mouth closed so they could keep their jobs. And then this whole trend started happening in the 80s saying, because I was in media at the time, so I heard a lot more than maybe the average person would hear. And they would say, the color now is green. All people care about is if you have money. Well, then we started finding people being profiled in their own neighborhood, and in the high-level cars were being stopped and asked, you know, is this your car? You know, I'm going to check it for drugs and that sort of thing. And that started to build up. And to me, the millennial generation was the first generation that had the response to the collection of things were happening, because they were on social media when the rest of mainstream wasn't on yet. And then the generation right behind them, the Gen Zs, the whole social media platform exploded. So people were starting to see this before the mainstream knew. These young people knew what they were looking at. And I remember calling out a trend that I saw starting when I said, when those high school students marched on Washington for gun rights, high school, I looked at my friends and I said, there has never been a high school march on Washington, ever. And they were looking at me like, well, maybe there's been one, you know. It's like, no, there hasn't. This has started something. And okay, so I read trends pretty well, because now the high schoolers that are still coming after them, this building is, and the message now is not what you hear older people say, because older people say what they said in the 60s, but this is in the 60s. They're not sick and tired. They're saying, not this time. Not on our watch. They're saying things like, I want to be able to tell my grandchildren what I did in 2020. And you know why they say that? Because when they ask their grandparents what they did in the 60s during the movement, they don't get good answers. So that's why now they can say, when my grandchildren ask me what I was doing while all this was going on in 2020, I want to be able to tell them what I did.
Yeah.
And be proud of it. Yes.
Oh, no.
Rob, you seem a little baffled.
No, this is great. I just, that's one of the, I've seen so many visuals now too. And I think one of the ones that was powerful for me, and Dima and I have shared these. We've talked about this offline, and one of the ones that struck me was a lady walking down the street saying that, been doing this since 1964. Why are we still doing the same shit? And it struck me how, is it an illusion? It feels like we've made some progress, but then, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. But then is that really an illusion? Because maybe, I don't know that we took the pedal off. I don't think we stopped trying to accelerate that. Okay,
well, there are 3 things there. One is it hasn't been a continuum of marching and protest. So the person who said we've been doing this since 64, we haven't. There hasn't been march and protest. I know because I've been working on the Dialogue on Race series since the late 80s, when I was able to get it off the ground in the early 90s. But I can tell you, people were saying this is done. 1964 is done. And so there hasn't been activity going on. And then all of the myths and misunderstandings started to build. And the voice that was defining what this era was about were largely media, owned and led by people who were white. And so they were looking at things through the white lens. And after a while, most African Americans stayed rather quiet. And those who were noisy were criticized as just being radicals instead of really having a strong message. So it hasn't been a thread all along. Yes, there's been suffering all along. And yes, there's been huge attempts at trying to change. Now, has things changed? Absolutely. Just look at the protests. When the protests of the civil rights movement, first off, it was never called the civil rights movement by those in the protest. It was called a freedom rights movement. And they were marching for freedom. They were well-dressed. They were nonviolent. And they didn't, at that time, the signs usually were unified signs, like the one sign that says, I am a man. If you got to march in your own country and say, I am a man, and then the country turns on you with its power of policing, but with dogs and hoses because you didn't have a permit to march, that's not what's happening now. Yeah. They're not deciding that the protesters don't have a right to march, but they have a new a lock on it, I call. They're trying to tell them what a protest should look like by saying the word peaceful. I think that's not helpful, and I think it could turn on them. So I think the word peaceful march came from the Vietnam protest. The Vietnam protest, I've been here a while. The Vietnam protest was about peace. No more war, peace. So because it came from the majority group, because the majority of those marching against Vietnam were white, they just put every protest, the word peace over it. Those who marched in the 60s never used the word peace. Maybe used it, but never used it as the description of the protest. Nonviolence was what they had intended. And they were not violent, but violence was heaped on them. This time, yes, there's violence being heaped by the fact that with police coming out in riot gear and military force, it does not make those in protest feel like these are the people who protect and serve. Yes. It feels like these are the people who are demanding that they stay in whatever decorum they determine is rightful protesting.
Yes. And I heard that this was the issue in Baton Rouge too, where initially everybody was marching together. There was no violence, but then at night they came back, and the police, they were all so armed, and that's what caused so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a threat. It's a threat to the group, and so they shouldn't be surprised when they have more uprising when they show up like that. Also, Rob, you're still wondering what kind of changes we saw. Well, for example, one of the things that they couldn't do during the protest then, they couldn't stop and eat anywhere. They couldn't use the restroom anywhere. And one of the protests was a sit-in at a lunch counter to buy a hamburger and a Coke. 9 Southern University law students in 1961 sat at a department store called Crest that had a lunch counter, but but Black people could not sit at that lunch counter. They could shop at Crest, but they couldn't sit at the lunch counter. So these law students decided it was federally, it was a law, but it was unjust. Federally, it was unjust. So they chose to use the federal statute and sit at that lunch counter. And of course, they were all arrested, put out of school, and were told they couldn't come back to any school in this state. And that included the governor and the attorney general. See, that's change. That's not kind of the way it's looked at. But still, there are many things being said by people who are elected and running for office that has a tone deafness to it. And that tone deafness comes from the fact that they haven't listened. In other words, I was on a radio show and someone asked me, what do I think of the sign, defund the police? I said, I would have to know what they are talking about before I make any decision on what I think of it. Yeah. So I said, all public officials who want to make a decision about that sign need to go and talk to them about what they're intending. As it turns out, I found out in the latest reports, they did not intend that there be no police force ever. They did not intend that police forces be shut down. But that's how some public officials have reacted to it. But when you stand outside and describe people and not get in there and talk to them, you make those mistakes. And really have a process conversation with them, listening included.
Yes, and the misleading definitions. So that's why I'm glad you mentioned about the defunding the police. Many times it is that how it is being defined by the media that creates so much anger, and people start taking action or taking sides based on just misleading information. That's right. And so let me say this, that there are two things to say about the media, but one of the things I want to tell Rob that changed was in 1964, I had graduated high school and I had scheduled to go to the all-Black college here. And then the lawsuit, LSU had to be sued, even though the law had passed that said I could go there. LSU said no. And so there was a lawsuit filed and they passed, the plaintiffs won the lawsuit that summer. And so I entered LSU in the fall. So that was something that happened, that I got to go to the public university that all Black taxpayers had paid for from the beginning of that university and from the beginning of having to pay taxes, and their children couldn't go there. So that's changed. So there's lots of change, but the change that needs to happen, we need to ask ourselves, well, what does need to change? Why are these people still protesting? They're protesting because the change shouldn't just be a little change. It shouldn't be nicer to the communities of color. All citizens of America should have full access, not some graduated barriers that are allowed by the white establishment. There should be no white establishment. There's an American establishment, and regardless of color, all citizens need to have full access. So, and Dima, you're refresh me again on what you were asking about the defining of the terms. No, it was not a question. It was mainly a statement that we are being misled by how it is being defined. Oh, the media. Yes, I want to talk about that because now we have so many different types of media. So when we used to say the media, we meant news media. But now media includes social media, and also media used to be mainstream, but now there's targeted media. And so it depends on what media you're listening to is what point of view you're getting. And if people listen to several types of points of view, then that's how they get such confusing information and misleading information.
That's
I wanted to ask you.
why
Oh, I'm so sorry.
go ahead. No, I was only
wanted
going to say
ask
that's
you,
why part of what we. I was just going to say that part of what we do is ask people to ask larger questions. So now I'm hearing you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. And I have a bit of feedback, and I'm trying to time it right, and I keep stepping on it. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So I had a question, that seems like change. That's definitely change. But it also doesn't seem like we're having just like little flashbacks either. The system's there. The obstacles are there, the graduated obstacles, even like you mentioned. So is it maybe an illusion of, maybe I should rephrase it, is it an illusion of tolerance? Because racism can seem so deeply rooted, not genetic in the family tree, but that it probably starts at the home, at the family unit. And then at least or is supplemented there to a certain extent. So since it's so deeply rooted, have we just had some tolerance to where that's pushed back isn't so public, except for some of these displays, but then it's still there. It's obviously still there, plus a system besides what we have at home. I mean, what do you believe on that? I mean, yes, there's change, and we've had some change since the way that's been, thankfully, but it definitely doesn't seem like enough to get us where we need to be now. So maybe that's why this question's coming out so gritty and awkward. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Yes, and the way your questions are being walked through is because when we're being educated on what our country is and what its history is, it's been so accurate, or so inaccurate. And so much of a story until we're just getting our hands around it when we actually end up coming face to face with it. So what you're doing is streaming as you go, because you're making the efforts to understand it almost on your own with no background and no pathway, because it wasn't in your books in school. And so when we talk about parents at home, they went to the same schools. They didn't get it either. So people just do the best they can with what they know. And because whiteness was so protected in this country, people who are white didn't have an exposure to even understand what they needed to know. They would say, well, that's those people, and they would get a description, because in dialogue, people come in and say, well, my parents used to tell me that when I asked, why do all Black people live in a certain part of town, my parents would say, because Black people like to live together. Well, as a kid, you don't think your parents is making that up. And actually, the parents weren't making it up. It was made up for the parents. So they're just passing on. And we call it perpetuating racism. So I tell people, when you use words like change, it's like in dialogue, we say, what does change mean to you? When we talk about who's the bad races and we think those are wrong questions. We think the questions need to be, says this is a problem in our country. It is all our problems. If there's crime in America, we're all having crime. If there's racism in America, we're all having racism. So the question becomes, how am I a part of the problem? And how can I become a part of the solution? Those questions can lead you somewhere else. Wow. Because we've all done something that has helped perpetuate racism. No exemptions.
Wow.
Not intentionally and not aware.
I always think of how we can be part of the solution. I never thought of how we are part of the problem.
Yes, and I want to get that question out big time, because when people say part of the solution, they think I'm good. Everybody else is the problem. But no, we're all the problem. But we shouldn't worry about blaming ourselves. We should realize, well, if I am, I'm not going to judge myself. I'm not going to make myself bad. I'm just going to wake up out of that.
Yeah.
And find a way to do that in a healthy way. And that is get informed.
And we all have unconscious bias. I catch myself with my unconscious bias. I try not to repeat it, but we all are living that, and that is part of our problem too.
Yes, and we all have an unconscious bias, and when we become aware of it, then we can do something about it. Because unconscious bias really means that you're not conscious of it, and that's fine, as long as you don't know. but when the outcomes tell you that something's wrong. So a lot of white people who are coming to dialogue, and I don't say whites as anything negative. I say it's a separate part that America set aside. Those were set aside by America to live under the whiteness group. Come in saying, I always knew something was wrong. I just didn't have any words to say and didn't know who to talk to.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's a vulnerable place to be in. But I mean, no, there's, which what struck me earlier though was the suffering has continued. That's the part that I think I connected with early on as a child. But it's hard to not see someone else suffering and want to not just understand their pain, feel their pain, but protect them from that pain. So for me, I don't know that early on just started seeing some disparities, started having some questions. But what I think is so powerful with what you're saying right now is asking really good questions. And so there's another part of that, which is actively listening, which is what I'm trying to do today. Because I have a one-on-one with Maxine Crump right now.
Glad to be one-on-one with you, Rob.
Dedication or just this one-on-one connection with you. I mean, you're very popular. I know the series, and you said exploded. You're right. I mean, there's a waiting list, right? And then I think there's already there's sessions down the road. We need more of you. So, I mean.
People want to talk. They want to know, and they want to.
But I love how you're saying the power of the right question.
How do I help people with that?
You could help me with more great questions that I should be asking.
Yes. Well, you want to talk about that? Because one of the things that I've seen, I've had my friends who are white come to tell me, I saw this black lady and I asked her, and I'm thinking, is it that white people assume that black people know all about race? Black people were schooled the same way white people were schooled, to ignore it, to talk about it as less as possible, and to never talk about it to anyone white. So you can't just walk up to somebody who's black and say, well, what do black people think? Or just ask them those deeper questions.
Yeah.
Because it sends a signal. I'm going to find out what I need from you and walk off and leave you. And so that is so out of line with the way culturally African Americans are. You can find out a lot if you want to become engaged and interact on an intimate level of trust that's built over time. But you certainly can't just walk up to someone and ask them as if they owe you an answer because you're unschooled. I had to tell someone recently who made a huge mistake in front of a group where somebody told of an experience that someone African American had. It was a very painful experience. The person who perpetrated the experience was unintentional and unaware. So the person who was white said, "Was he joking?" And I mean, my breath stopped. It's like, you just heard about someone's hurt, and your question is, what was the intentions of the man who hurt her, instead of what pain she just experienced. So that's what you do when you don't know. You're trying to find out whether he meant it or not. We have to stop looking for intentions and measure by outcome. Outcome was there had been someone hurt by someone who had in their mind good intention. Measure by results. And the wrong question to ask in the presence of the person's story, and the man's not even there to give his intention. So it makes it seem like when a white person saying that about another white person, that if you say, "Oh yeah, he was joking," then they go, "Oh well, then." So it has a dangerous assumption there. So black people don't know either, because we have lived under the umbrella of let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's not taught in school to them either. I had a young African-American man ask me, college student, he said, "Do all black people experience racism?" He said, "Because I don't think I have." So you want to walk up to that young man and ask him about race? So you see, they don't know. They don't all know. We're all getting this education together. Why do I know? Because I experienced the 60s. I've been in media, I've walked through it, and I've worked on developing this process and been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
I have to agree with you there. I mean, but you almost need that safe space, because I've been blessed with some amazing friendships along the way that we were able to have those awkward conversations, or those weird, raw, just authentic questions, or Q&A, or just moments to connect and ask, really, because you've seen something, or you've heard something, or you want to know if it's true. I mean, many conversations on the couch, or in lobbies, or walking with friends. I mean, without those aha moments that they gave me of awareness, the only other place I would really see it or be able to talk about it was in a movie, right? I know there's literature out there now, and we have some resources there now. There's social media now, but up until this point, my growth was always from those raw conversations with my friends that allowed me to see a different perspective.
Yeah.
And they gave me that gift, but with that gift, you also see the suffering. And just, I guess now what just hits you so hard is how this is, it's just there. You can't hide from it. The change needs to happen. So yeah, it's just, I've been very blessed to have some of those conversations along the way, and I'm thankful that I've had them with friends that are still, very close to me.
I happen to know that Orhan, our friend Orhan, is watching. He's also the board chair, and he's probably sitting there saying, "When's Maxine gonna talk to Rob about calling for a safe space?" Right now. Because he often hears me say to the facilitators, we're not offering a safe space. This is not a safe situation, but we're offering an environment that gives people a space to be open, honest, and brave. It's not going to feel comfortable. And sometimes when people look for safety, they want to feel comfortable. It's going to make you very uncomfortable, but
yeah,
America makes white people very comfortable otherwise. So when you talk about race, you're not going to be comfortable because America didn't prepare you to do that. So don't expect to be comfortable or feel safe. You will be, but you won't feel safe.
Right.
And what we try to make sure you come to, and I see it happening all the time, people come to the place where they become okay with feeling uncomfortable because they know it's a purpose in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You unlock growth there, and understanding, and tolerance, and knowledge, and relationships.
Yeah.
And that goes back to your point about talking. When you talk, that results in action. So you're creating that environment for talking.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know Rob mentioned earlier about the importance of family and how they're raising their kids and educating them about all of these topics, but also corporations and the organizations we're working at is so important. So I'm sure all of us have seen the statements that a lot of these organizations are putting out. And I'm happy to see these statements, but I'm always wondering about what are they doing internal. So the statement is more external, like we're supportive but internal. And I know a lot of them, I go and I consult with them or do coaching for them. And the first thing I do is I go to their website to see their executive team and who's on their board. And guess what I see? Yes. So, it has so many different dimensions. It's not just show your support. It is, what are you doing internally to hire, in your hiring, in your suppliers? Who are you spending your money with? How do your executive team look like? All of this in all aspects.
Perfect. Well, I do know that some of them are activating their statements more than used to. I do know someone who said that she was there were some companies putting out Black Lives Matter, and she checked out their website as you did and saw they didn't have not one person of color on their staff. And so, do they really matter to you? You know, but at the same time, we're having businesses and organizations calling us right now saying, how can we get this conversation to our staff, and we included? And the next best thing they're asking, and we're working on this right now, they want a survey to see where the barriers are in their companies. Therefore, the question, how am I part of the problem? How can I be a part of the solution? I'm so excited about that, because as soon as we're able to get that survey into different companies and they start responding to it, others are going to want it too. So excited.
And the survey, the purpose of the survey is mainly to help them understand what's going on internally, or to compare also these different organizations or industries with each other as well.
Yes, because companies are usually not intentionally racist. They're just unaware because whiteness has been protected. So it's just hard for them to see, because they're running a business. They're thinking of bottom line, and they're thinking of qualifications and things like that. And they're not feeling that it's a part of their world to think about how they impact race, or how race has impacted them. But now they see that part. And so this survey would help them see barriers that they haven't seen before. One of the barriers, like you said, is who are your vendors? Who are you spending your money with in other institutions, and what do you require of them? And so, yes, and when companies start to look at what they didn't know were barriers, it will be very helpful to them. I do believe when people know better, they do better, because I've seen it.
Yeah.
So, Maxine, what will come after the surveys? Will there be some more education? Will there be some more opportunities? I guess, what are some of the engagements that come after the survey, I guess? Is that where we can not just unlock the dialogue, but I guess, are there other plans after that you mentioned?
Yes, we're starting with the survey, and we're already asking the larger question, what needs to be done with the survey? And we don't expect to be the end all be all to this whole process. We would want to work collaboratively with other people who know how to help companies go to that next level. Maybe the kind of thing Dima would be a part of. We could be able to turn over resources to her because of the work she does, you know? So that's the sort of thing. But what we want is to get them thinking. And so in that case, and one of the things we will be asking about is how do they, their employees are gonna get a survey too. There's gonna be two surveys. The company will get a survey about their company. And one of the questions they will be asked is, how do they think their employees see the company? And on the other hand, the employees are gonna get a survey that asks them the same question. And they will get to see both. At least the company will get to see both. And we will not have the employees use their names or any identifying marks on their survey. And so they will get to see what their image is to the people that work for them.
Yeah.
And so we're building this out. This is just a start. But how does it sound so far, Dima, as someone who knows surveys executives?
It sounds so good. And I like the fact that you are asking the employees to rank the company too. Because usually it's, and there's a funny image about it where you have the executive team all white sitting around a table and they say, diversity is good, pass it down. So in their opinion, it's good, let the rest of the organization figure it out. But when you're hearing from across the chain of where they see the company, that's when it's going to be very eye-opening. So I'm glad you're doing that, because if you're going to go to the executives, they're going to be like, yeah, we have a diversity and inclusion manager. We donate to the historically Black college. So to them, they're just so isolated. I'm glad you're doing that.
Oh, good. That's support. Great.
Yeah, and if you want to brainstorm, let me know. I would want to all the time, not specifically for diversity and inclusion, but a lot more about the culture and employee engagement. So I'm happy to help.
Okay.
What's your thoughts, Rob?
I like the idea of the survey. I think, what comes after that can also be great. I love the idea. I think it's great. And I know that Maxine, how can people sign up for your series too? Because can you
can
talk
go to our-
more about the Dialogue on Race, the series?
Wait, say that again.
Well, so you have people signing up for events, and you have a waiting list for it. To get in to have those, are they virtual?
They're all virtual right now.
And
So
how
it's
often do those happen?
Oh, now we have two on one day. Sometimes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So every day.
Every day,
Anytime
twice
people
a day.
want them. Noon, morning, evening.
Wow.
We can do them because virtual allows for all of that. And if even not virtual, if people wanted those times, because it's in these small groups, we're portable. And because we have a tool.
I'm so happy we're doing it virtually. I have to share.
What about it?
I'm happy because before I couldn't attend them. I was traveling a lot. So
that's right. Yes.
Since I moved to Louisiana, I wanted to be part of it, but I couldn't. And now finally, I am going to be one of your students in July. So maybe even after the COVID-19, all of this, the experience we're living with right now, maybe it is a good idea to have both virtual and in person. Because
we're going to keep virtual.
We have people from outside of Louisiana that may not have something similar in their state that they're signing up as well.
Yeah, they're already doing that.
Yeah.
Yes, we will keep virtual.
That is so great. And so where can people sign up? Where should they go if they want to get more information, Maxine?
The website, dialogueonracelouisiana.org.
Dialogueonracelouisiana.org. Would you want to walk them through the website perhaps at all?
I think it's pretty easy to follow. They'll just go to registration.
Join the dialogue. Okay, registration at the top. Got it.
Yeah, and they can either sign up for a series, or they can just there's a place on there for them to just send information or questions as well. We see them all.
Got it.
And Maxine, for the companies that are interested in your survey, do they also go to the same website, or how can they reach you?
Yeah, we're going to put them on the website, but we're just developing it. It's not up yet, but we're going to put them on the website.
Yeah.
And we'll probably put this conversation on our Facebook page.
Yeah, this one needs to be marketed a lot.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking how to group it with large companies, mid-size, small size, different regions, different industries. It's fascinating to see what information you're going to gain from all of this.
I know. I can hardly wait to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now I'm putting the website up right now. This is great. Perfect. So we've got the website address down below, and make sure you go there. You can go to the registration page at the top right, and you've got the information for the website. You've got their email address, the phone number, all that information's right there. You can donate to the cause, the series. You can sign up for the newsletter. It's a vast website, and I'm actually going to pull it up here really quick because I got to show it off as long as I can.
Nice.
I usually have this crazy big setup, but I'm working on one screen here. So
that's us.
That's great. So that's us. And then so you've got all the information here at the top. You've got the registration page, some resources you can donate, how to contact them. So amazing page. I was looking at it earlier. You've got a video. You got a great picture of you on
That's
here.
our public service announcement. It's about a minute. You want to play it?
Let's see. The audio might come through. Let's see if we can do that.
Yeah, it's a really good spot. It's about a minute.
Perfect.
Wow. I couldn't hear it very well, but the words delivered the message. It's a nice video, Maxine.
It's a great
Yes,
video.
thank you. It was done by one of our alums.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
But our website is Designs Interactive.
Yeah, of course. We have.
You're in good hands there. Love it. There it is right there. Love your website. It is vast. You've got a lot of resources on here. And definitely highly recommend everyone go here, register for the series. And let's see, we've even got some comments here. We got a lot of comments. That's a big one we can get to. And then there's another one, great conversation. And that Maxine is dropping pearls of wisdom as usual. Love it.
Right. Well, Maxine, we learned a lot. I know I'm leaving with thinking more deeply about how I am being part of the problem. So that by itself was an aha moment. And of course, how I'm going to continue to be part of the solution. Thank you for joining us today. And I can't wait. I can't wait to be part of Dialogue on Race and learn more from you.
Great. You guys have been wonderful to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. And can I ask you one quick question before we go? What is your view on leadership? What's driving you, like your motivation?
My motivation is from the experience of my ancestors, actually seeing a father who I thought was the most wonderful person in the world, have tried to navigate the system so that his children wouldn't butt up against the barriers that he did. And watching that led me to realize, he need not do this by himself, and now it's my turn to make that lead. So my motivation is that.
Thank you for sharing that, Maxine. We appreciate that. And it's been a joy today. I appreciate it. Really encourage everyone to go to your website, find more about your resources there, sign up for the series, sign up for getting involved and engaged in the cause and the dialogue. And in my case, I need to do a lot of listening and learning.
Yeah.
So I welcome you to do so.
Grandchildren will be proud.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maxine. This has been great. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. We know that you've been extremely busy, and keep doing the great work that you're doing. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on our show today.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.